good morning, everybody. Certainly an incredibly difficult environment to be doing a budget in. Both globally, it's a very difficult environment. Domestically, we know that GDP growth is trapped at somewhere around about, 0.5% to 1.5%, largely because of failures in energy and logistics. And that is a very, very difficult budgeting environment for the minister, and I thought he did a decent job.
So in your eyes, it was a good budget?
Yeah, absolutely. In very difficult circumstances, it's a budget that demonstrates an ongoing commitment to what we call fiscal discipline, which is really trying to bring down the country's debt. We have an extraordinary amount of debt. I always quote how much money we have to borrow as South Africa every day just to balance our books. And at the moment, that's just over 2 billion rand a day.
Sure.
That's an extraordinary amount of money. And, listeners must always remember that the only people who can pay that money back are taxpayers. It's you and I.
There's still, though, some positive news in the sense that there's now a lot of space for the private sector to work with government.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that our budgets will remain extraordinarily difficult while GDP growth is trapped in the, let's call it 1% zone, if you allow me some rounding. And we know that it is there because of the problems in energy and logistics. And the only way practically that those problems can be solved on the energy front is through private sector generation, and on the logistics front is through partnering with existing government, private sector, public sector logistics players to materially improve logistics outcomes, which means, for example, that our mining companies will be able to export their products and make more profits. One of the biggest negatives in this budget, for people who went into the detail, was the huge fall in mining taxes, largely because of energy and logistics.
Because even though we can be now certain the commodities boom is over, we could have still gained a lot more had the energy and logistics crises been solved. The other issue, of course, is the state-owned enterprises and the bailouts. He's resisting pressure for more. He says he was under pressure from Transnet's creditors to give to the rail and port company, but he refused.
Yeah, we host a dinner with the finance minister every budget speech after the budget, and that was last night. And during his speech at dinner, he said that I think since 2008 we spent 500 billion rand bailing out SOEs, and it's absolutely extraordinary amount of money. And if you look at them, they're not working either. So that money clearly hasn't been beneficial in delivering better outcomes for taxpayers and the public.
We get to keep our medical aids for now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you would have heard business quite simply say that national health insurance is unconstitutional, unaffordable, and unimplementable. That does not mean that business doesn't want to improve healthcare for all South Africans, but as currently constructed, it will simply not produce that outcome. So really what you saw in this budget was that NHI, as currently constructed, is not funded. So it is unfunded and unimplementable. There's a little bit of money set aside to try and do some research and improve some things, but NHI, as it's currently written, is not funded in this budget.
So, much talk has been about the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account. I think it was Hilary Joffe who said, is this selling the family silver?
It is in some ways. If you allow me a minute or two, it's really, really complex, but I'm going to bring it down to, let's assume that our country was a family, and we're a family that's earning 400,000 rand a year, but we're spending 420,000. That's a 5% fiscal deficit in country terms. That 20,000 that we're spending too much every year builds up in an overdraft account, and that overdraft is okay when it's small, but it's getting bigger and bigger. And really, our family also has a pension fund account that has been doing quite well, and we were hoping to keep that for a rainy day or our pensions, but we have the ability to take some of that money and repay our debt. And I think that's a sensible thing to do, provided that we fix the root problem, which is you cannot spend 420,000 when you only earn 400,000.
I mean, that's a really great analogy, but the trouble is critics are saying, look, It is a good idea for now, but it's only always going to be a temporary measure. We may not be so lucky again if we don't turn things around. And one of the things that people have pointed out was that he seemed to forecast positive growth without much indication as to how we were going to get there.
Well, I think that it's absolutely correct. It is a one-off benefit, and it's been treated like that in the budget. It is absolutely not recurring. What's absolutely vital is that going forward, we bring down debt, and the only way to bring down debt is to run what's called a primary surplus. So before interest costs, you need to at least earn more than you spend. And this budget does produce a primary surplus over the next 3 years. So you would definitely give him a tick for that.
Let's go back to your family. Last question. Should taxpayers be worried about bracket creep? I mean, yes, personal income taxes went untouched, but they were also not adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, absolutely. Bracket creep is a sort of sneaky way of increasing tax. And the biggest increase in tax here, year on year, is in personal taxes, and it's all through bracket creep. It's a very subtle way of delivering that. Basically, as South Africa, we should be incredibly worried for so long as our economy only grows at 1%. If we have an economy that's growing at 3 or 4%, which is entirely possible, if we fix energy and logistics, our budgets would look so much better, and we wouldn't have things like bracket creep eating into South Africans' back pockets to fund this budget.
Take it from one who knows. Mike Brown is the Nedbank CEO. Appreciate your time this morning.
Join us. This is 702.